Today I'm going to talk about two different things. That is a little bit of a walkthrough on this color wheel and also how to set up a palette. So first thing about this is a particular brand. This is called the Pocket Color Wheel. It's manufactured by the Color Wheel Company. And there's some pretty cool features about this that I'll kind of walk you through the benefits of having a color wheel. So first of all, we talked about different color terminology, and some of that you can find on here on the back side. So here we have the front side, here we have the back side of this. And for instance, if we are to hold this with yellow at the top, we can see that the complement is violet across from that. So we can spin this and we can find out a complementary color. Yellow, opposite violet. Blue, opposite orange, obviously, and spin this around, we can see that red is opposite of green. But we can also do this with the intermediate or secondary color, or rather the intermediate colors in between the primary and the secondary colors. So for instance, red-orange, if you're curious about what would make a pleasing color pair for thinking about color harmony, we could move this spinner and we could see that red-orange is directly opposite blue-green. And remember, I kind of talked about that a little bit, that psychological response about why surgeons wear bluish-green. And here you can see kind of the reddish-orange directly opposite the blue-green. So this is helpful for mixing color, but also helpful for figuring out what colors you might want to use for color harmony. Another thing it does is it shows you our triads. We could see that here is a primary triad, like red, blue, and yellow. We can move it to the secondary triad, orange, green, violet. Then we can also move it to a more complex one, like yellow, orange, blue, green, red, violet. That shows us this triadic color arrangement that's going to have color harmony. There's also some neat things on here that helps us to pre-guess color mixing before we actually do it. Why would we want to know how to mix a color before we even try to do it with paint? Well, it's going to save us time, it's going to save us cost as well, because if you understand where a color is going to go before you even physically add stuff, instead of saying, oh, here's a little yellow, that didn't work, let's throw some more yellow at it, oh, it turns out I need to add red to it, then if you could pre-guess that and start to think about what a color is before you even mix it, then obviously you're going to save time and you're going to save paint, which will save you money. So this shows you can see these three colors directly underneath a color here. So at the top it points to what the pure color is, and then it has tint, tone, and shade. So tint with this would be, here's what we would do if we added white to this color. So the top one is the tint. The shade, so adding white is a tint, adding black is a shade. So if you took yellow, orange, and you added black to it, you would get this shade where it kind of goes towards this caramel kind of brown color here. And then tone, well, what is tone? Tone is if we take this yellow, orange, and we mix a light gray with it. So if we take yellow, orange, mix gray, that gives us the tone. So we can do this for any of the colors. We could kind of spin this and pre-guess where a color is going to go. So with blue, green, we have the tint, adding white, we have the tone, adding gray, and we have the shade, adding black. So this is really helpful. This tells us a lot of information here. Also, it'll tell us, if we dial in, it can tell us the difference between warm and cool colors. So if we spin it this way, and it shows us on this side, here we have the warm colors, here we have the warm colors, here we have the cool colors as well. So this is helpful for showing us kind of different layouts for thinking about color harmony or thinking about just kind of color systems when you're going about making a painting. Obviously, we also talked about analogous colors. We could look, on a color wheel and say, well, what colors are actually touching without being adjacent? And so here we could set up some color decisions with analogous colors, which is going to be pleasing as well. Now, if we're flipping to the other side here, what's nice about this, it'll tell us some of the other things that if we were to add particular colors to one of these pure spectral colors on the outside, what would happen? So for instance, this one's pretty straightforward. If you take blue, if you add yellow, you're going to get this green. That's helpful. Well, what if we're going to add, white to that blue? Okay, so we have this blue, we add white, it's going to give us this color. Here, if we add black, it's going to go towards here. What about adding red to blue? It's going to give us this violet. So we could do this for any one of these colors. What happens when we add yellow to red violet? Here we get this. What about adding red? It's going to go more towards this kind of reddish violet. Adding blue, it's going to go almost towards a bluish purple. Adding white, adding black, right? So some of these become pretty obvious, but others, for instance, like yellow, if we add blue to yellow, we know we're going to get green, but what happens when we add black? You would expect it to still be yellow, but here it's starting to almost be like this greenish color. So really helpful for a color wheel to be able to explore it and predict what a color is going to do before you actually physically do it with paint. So this can be a really, really helpful tool. So I wanted to show you a color wheel. I really recommend you picking up one. And I sent in your kit how to make your own color wheel too, which is really helpful. So you should be getting that soon. Next, what I want to show you is how to lay out your color palette. So first of all, I've got mine laid out in a warm, cool triangle. So as you get more complex with your palette, and say you're working on a painting that has a lot more gradation or tonality or colors to it, like you're adding different reds and purples, then you could branch out even further, have a larger palette, but you'd want to keep it kind of similar to warms on one side of the spectrum, cools on, say, the top part. And if we're adding white and black to this, which would make sense, but for today's demonstration, I'm not using white and black, so I don't have it on here. But adding black, I would put over here, I'd put white here, and black up here. So we have warms and we have cools up here. Now, just a brief mention about palettes, just for the sake of ease, and today for visuals, I'm using this little paper plate that will be helpful in terms of seeing how to lay out the color. But obviously, there's a whole range of different types of palettes that you could use. This one here is nice because if you think about it, it's circular and it's going to reflect some of the aspects of the color wheel too. So you could lay it out in the same kind of idea. Warms, cools, similar to this, right? Warm up here, cool down here, warm, cool. You could put your whites, your blacks to separate things. And then this in the center is where we have a mixing well. So we could take a little bit of these colors, put them in here, and start to intermix these to get your next color. So I just want to walk you through a little bit of my setup before we show the first part of this demonstration. I have my layout, I have some brushes here. I have these are the paints that I'm using that y'all have as well. We have the cadmium red light here. You guys might also have naphtha red medium. We have the ultramarine blue. And we have this medium yellow. So these three primaries right here, we can get about 90% of the colors we're trying to mix out of just these right here, adding white and black, of course. I also have 2 palette knives. It's super helpful to have palette knives. These are flexible, so it's going to give you some flexibility in terms of mixing instead of something that's rigid. And then this is a metal one. These are going to be a little more pricey when you're purchasing palette knives, but this one's going to last a lot longer because there's just the possibility of plastic over time breaking. These clean up real nice as well. So we have these things. Also, I want you to think about being really precise with mixing colors. What I like to do is a lot of times when I'm mixing color, I'll put a little Sharpie line here on the actual palette knife. That way I could consistently mix the same amount every single time, like a dollop of red. Like if I'm mixing orange, how many dollops of red do I need? And you can kind of keep this even increment throughout as you mix. And here I'm going to say this orange that I'm mixing is going to be 2 parts red and, or I'm sorry, 2 parts yellow and 1 part red. And then here I can use this knife to mix it up to get me that actual orange that I'm looking for. And you can press down. This is going to help mix it a lot better, right? Pressing down like this, you can see when you do that, when it squeezes out, there's parts that aren't mixed. So this is really helpful to get all of the paint consistently mixed. The next thing I wanted to show you is I have a rag set up over here and I have a cup of water. So I would always suggest setting up the same way. You know, have your palette nearby, have your paints, have your brushes ready to go, have whatever you're going to paint on. In this case, for the next demonstration, I'm going to use paper, but it could be canvas. And then just 2 other notes about palettes. So today. This is really nice for a palette. Super helpful. This is a palette, a little bit on the larger scale. And then if you're working on a really big painting, like say when we get into our still life painting or when we get into our landscapes, you might prefer a bigger setup like this for your palette, where you can do something like warms over here, cool colors over here, and then use these as mixing wells. Use these as mixing wells. Your palette is going to look like your painting, essentially. So maybe you're doing something monochromatic and it's mostly blues. You wouldn't need to set up the whole range, but you probably still would want to, maybe the whole painting is blue, but you probably still want yellow and red out there and white and black, because one blue might have a touch of yellow in it. One blue might have a touch of red in it without going completely purple. So this is really helpful if you're thinking about how to set up your color palette. Now, obviously, also you probably see wooden ones before that are cut with a little thumb hole in them so you can hold it, and it's a little bit more portable if you're out there painting in a landscape. So you could use a palette like that as well. Just want to show you a few options and use what you think is best for your needs. There's also these palettes that are really cool that stay wet. So it would be sort of a palette similar to this, but it would have a covering over it and a sponge. So the sponge would stay wet, and then you would put the seal over top of it, almost like a Tupperware container each time you go to paint. And then eventually what you do is you just wring out the sponge, you change out the sponge, and then it stays really nice and damp in there so the colors don't dry out. Now, if you're going to use a palette like this, you probably are only going to want to put out a little bit of a paint at a time, because this will dry fairly quickly. It's acrylic, it's not oil-based. So you would want to seal this with saran wrap, or put a little ball of paper towel in there, like a wet paper towel. Just fold it up, put it in there, then wrap it with aluminum foil or saran wrap, and that moisture in there is going to trap in there and keep those colors open a little bit longer. So that's a little bit of a brief introduction of how to use a color wheel, how to set up your color palette, and my next demonstration I'm going to show you guys a little bit about color mixing.